Meet PitchDB, the ultimate platform for speakers looking to make their mark on podcasts, conferences, and media outlets. PitchDB provides access to over 3 million platforms, ensuring you find the perfect avenue for your message. With AI integrations, your bios and pitches are tailored uniquely to each opportunity, giving you the edge you need. Join now at pitchdb.com.
Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I have had the honor and privilege of being on Dr. William Attaway's show myself, his podcast. So I am so pleased to have him on my podcast. And you are just such a leader in so many ways. Every time we have a conversation, whether it's on a show or just because we want to catch up on Zoom, I walk away feeling just so peaceful and optimistic and powerful. And you've really made your life work in this mix of ministry, but also business, leadership coaching, development, mindset. So I'd love for you to take us on a journey of those two things that I think have a lot in common, but, obviously people usually separate one into more science and the world of business and one into the world of spirituality and God. But there is this movement, I feel, that people are really seeing that you have to bring everything together to be a full person and to really be the best you can. So will you please unweave a little bit of this narrative? Is this what you thought you'd be doing with your life?
No. Not even close.
Well, that's short answer.
That's right. I actually went to school. When I went to college, I went as a pharmacy major. I had worked in a pharmacy in high school and really enjoyed what I was learning and being able to be a part of meeting tangible needs in people's lives and serving them in that way. And so I went to college as a pre-pharmacy major. I got into my second year, took organic chemistry, and that's the point that they designed as the washout point. We're going to wash out the people who really don't need to be doing this. Right. And it worked. And I washed right out. It was exactly as designed. It was not my gift. Chemistry is the sciences, is not how my brain is wired. I applied myself. I dug in. I worked really hard, and I washed right out. So I was like, okay, so what's it going to be? And I did not have a clear direction and focus. So dropped out of school and I started working. I started leading my first team when I was 19. And boy, you talk about learning a lot about leadership the hard way. You make so many mistakes early on. And so I began to do that and began to grow and develop as a leader, as a team leader. I moved into a corporate environment and started working in sales. And it was at that point that my life took a very unexpected turn, and I met Jesus, and everything began to change in my life. And I began to say, well, what's this whole faith thing about now? And how does that integrate with the rest of me? I've spent a lot of time studying antiquity, and throughout ancient history, we have so many different contributors to the way that you and I think today. And I believe it's from the ancient Greeks that we inherited this concept of compartmentalization, this idea that you can wall off different parts of your life. And then what happens over here in this part's not going to affect what happens here. And that's not going to affect what happens here. And that's a really cute myth, much like Zeus. It's not true.
Yeah.
The fact is every part of your life bleeds into every other part. You are one person and every part touches. And so what I have done now is allow and try to bring out the full version of who I'm designed to be, how I'm created to be. I'm a systems thinker. So, I operate in that vein in organizations that I'm a part of, whether it's church or a business. The business that I started is designed specifically to pour into and invest in people as leaders, developing teams so they can get out of their own way, so they can achieve what it is they're capable of instead of being the lid on their own progress.
Yeah.
And I think there's a way to do both of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, did you go back to school at any point?
I did.
You did?
I did. I went back and pursued and got a graduate degree, finished my bachelor's, got a graduate degree in theology and PhD in biblical backgrounds and archaeology.
Wow. Okay. So you really went back to school.
I love to learn. Yeah. I do. I love to learn. I love to read. I love to write. And so PhD was a logical progression for that. I intended to teach, and I did for a while in the university and college setting.
Yeah. Fantastic. It's so interesting that so many people still have this problem figuring out how to be a whole person.
Yeah.
I have so many students who, because you know that I teach, and I have students who are not willing to share what's going on in their lives, and they'd rather take the 0 and not turn in an assignment instead of, okay, just send me the doctor's note to show me that you were sick and you were out and there was a reason why you didn't get this in on time. Let's just have an open conversation. And we had such a different experience this last term in most of my classes where I had students saying at the end of it, this is what we really needed, because we had hard conversations and we opened up to each other. Because I said, this is, yes, but the world of digital media, which is what I teach, is going to be affected by how you show up, not just for yourself, but for your team together, and making sure that you are bringing your whole self to everything you do, because that lived experience will enrich the experiences of everybody else. And it'll then enrich the work that you're doing and the way that you're looking at other people, and making sure to incorporate thinking about people who are different than you and how they might need to access information on the internet, right? So it's funny because you think, oh, you're just teaching these digital skills, the compartmentalization of knowing about video on demand or knowing about social media or whatever. But really, if you don't have this other side, then none of that's going to work.
100%. People want to be seen as actual 3D human beings, not just the role that they play in a certain part of their life, student in this case. They don't want to be seen just as a student. They want to be seen as a person. And when you begin to ask those hard questions and have those difficult conversations, what are you doing but you're seeing them as actual 3D human beings? And you're allowing them to bring all of themselves into that conversation, into that relationship. And whenever we do that, whether it's on a team, whether it's in a business, doesn't matter, whether it's in a church, when you invite people to bring all of themselves, not just one part, not just a facade, when they get to bring all themselves, they lean in. They lean in because you actually see me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You actually value me enough to treat me that way.
Yeah.
People lean into that.
Yeah. So you went from being 19, college dropout, working, leading teams, into finding God, finding Jesus, going back to school, pursuing these other lines. How did you get then into hosting a podcast, writing a book, being a mentor and coach for people for 30 years now?
Nearly. Just about next year will be 30 years. Yeah, it's a little hard to believe.
Well, you don't look old enough for it to have been 30 years.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's interesting because I think that there's no such thing as a wasted experience in your life. I think everything that we go through is either for our benefit somehow, or it's for the benefit of other people that we're going to interact with. The question is, are we going to allow ourselves to be a conduit of that experience and that learning, or are we going to hold it all inside and try to keep it just for ourselves? And so one of the things that I've learned over time is that there's been no wasted step in my journey. Whether it was working in a pharmacy and learning something that I very seldom use today, but it was all about people and learning how people work and how people think and relationships and interactions and interpersonal relationships. That's incredibly valuable, right? Moving from there into a business sphere where now I'm leading teams of people, not all of whom necessarily want to be there every day.
Yeah.
And I get to invest in them and pour into them and see them and watch them thrive as they are seen. You move from there into the corporate world where, again, I'm learning different interpersonal dynamics, how to lead in a different context. And then in the church world, right? Leading in a nonprofit in a church where the vast majority of the people are not paid to be there. They choose to be there or not. These are volunteers. Well, let me tell you, leading volunteers who can walk away at any moment when you don't have a paycheck as leverage, that requires a different kind of leadership. I think it requires a purer kind, because this can't be just like, well, if you don't do your thing, then I'm not going to pay you. Now, you've got to lead from a place of inspiration. You've got to lead from a place of motivating them based on how they are wired for a greater good. So every step, this has helped me. And as I have been working with leaders, from C-suite leaders to solopreneurs over the years, I have been able to bring all of those experiences to bear in our relationships. Now I bring not only my own experience, but the conversations that I've had with all of these different variety of leaders over the years into conversations with clients in our sessions where they're like, I'm struggling with this. And, I've got, I remember a conversation I had where somebody else was struggling with that. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Let's talk through some of that. Let me ask you some questions based on that conversation. It's a knowledge base. but all of that was part of the journey.
Right. How did you come to realize that you had these dual callings that were where you needed to move into, right? Because you were a professor, you were an instructor for a long time. You've done a lot of other things at the same time. But now I think as most of us learn, like even if we are able to do a lot of things, we have to niche down into what's really going to make our heart sing and what we're most passionate and how we feel we can most help others.
That's a great question. When did I discover that? I think I'm still discovering it, honestly. I think I'm still discovering that. I think I'm still learning what it means to find what it is that's your superpower.
Right.
You know, as I continue to narrow, as I continue to learn and grow, it's a never-ending process for me. I know more now than I did 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I know more 10 years ago. You know, I started my business, you know, in 2018, but I had been coaching leaders for a long time up to that point. I had just been doing it as a part of the other things that I did. I laughingly joked with my wife, I've never done just one thing.
Right.
You know, there's always been multiple threads that are a part of my life. And every one of those is important. I worked in archaeology a bit. I worked on digs overseas, right? And going and digging in Jordan for a season for 5 weeks, you know, like going down into the ground with a trowel. You know, you're basically, my wife says, you got like a teaspoon. You're like moving the dirt teaspoon at a time. You know, I'm going down into the dirt and revealing what was there, but you couldn't see it.
Yeah.
You know what? That's awfully similar to what I do with clients as an executive coach. I'm taking a trowel. That's my questions, right? And with the questions, I'm slowly digging down and revealing what was already there. It just couldn't be seen.
And when you started your company, you'd already you have certifications, you're part of other, you know, coaching groups. What prompted you to say, I need to start something of my own? And that is catalytic leadership. And what does catalytic leadership mean to you? Because I know that's also the title of your most recent book.
It is the title of the company and the book and the podcast that I host. I've tried to be consistent. I've learned this much about marketing. Right? That's right. The consistency. It really comes out of my story. When I was in high school, I was 15 years old when I attended my first leadership conference because I had a high school teacher who invited me to go. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And he said, I think you would love this. And so he invited me to go. And so I went and I was hooked. I was captivated by the power of leadership when it's used well and the danger of it when it's not. And it was in that vein that I began, as I went into college, went into pharmacy. I remember one day in class sitting listening as they described a catalyst in chemistry, right? And the whole idea of a catalyst is it's something that you introduce into a mixture that's either going to incite or accelerate significant change or action. As I thought about that, I remember thinking every great leader I have ever studied about or learned from would resonate with that. Like they want to be catalytic in what they're doing. They want to incite or accelerate significant change or action. They want to make a difference. And so really the last 30 years for me have been exploring that question. What makes a leader catalytic? Mm-hmm. What's the differentiator between a leader who's just, you know, leading and one who's truly making an impact?
Yeah.
And that's what the book was. The book was capturing of 12 principles, these threads that I've seen as common threads through so many conversations over the years with clients. What makes a leader catalytic? It's these 12 things. That's where I've learned so far. And now with the podcast, I can explore that in more real time. You know, when you're on the show, tell me about your journey. What has made your difference as you've been going? What have you learned? What have been your biggest wins and your most difficult challenges? What do you wish you had known before? And in mining from so many different people, so many different guests who are willing to share their stories, that only helps me to grow. And there's a real hunger and thirst for that among the people who listen to the show who want to learn and grow as well. I don't think you and I are going to live long enough to make all the mistakes ourselves. Right? I want to learn from as many as I can so I can avoid those ditches. Right. I want to stay on the road.
Yeah.
And that's what learning from other people helps me to do.
Yeah. And I imagine you're able to weave in some of the case studies, narratives, anecdotes from the podcast and from your coaching experiences into these principles.
Absolutely, 100%. The podcast was actually started after the book. I went on a podcast book tour after I released the book, and I was on 82 shows, I think, over the 9 months after the book was released. That was a sprint. I had never done that before. And about halfway through that, I thought, man, this is a lot of fun. And I'm learning a lot just being on this side of the table. What if I got to be on the other side of the table as the host and invite people that I wanted to have conversations with and learn from, and then share those conversations? And I thought, I want to do this. The podcast had been in my mind for a while. It'll get there. It's on the someday maybe list. But that was the moment there in 2022. And I said, okay, it's time.
I love it. I love having these conversations and being able to learn from every single guest that I have on. And then I go back and listen to the episodes and I get to learn all over again. So it's
I do the same thing.
Fantastic. So how do people usually work with you? You talk about these 12 principles, but is there a common issue people usually have when they say, okay, William, you're the person I need to work with. I know that you can help me with this.
Now, it is a little bit different with each person. And this is why I don't have a cookie cutter approach to what I do. This is why I can only work with so many people at a time, because it's custom.
Yeah.
I really try to design what I do with a client around what they need most. The areas, I call them the areas of primary focus, where we're going to really dial in during our time together. The goal for me is to help them get out of their own way. And if there's one thing that really is a thread across every one of my clients, it's that. And that's true of myself. I mean, the coaches that I work with, that I hire and work with, like, they help me get out of my own way, because you can't see the full picture when you're in the frame. You need somebody on the outside who's going to ask you questions nobody else is going to ask you in your world, and help you see things that you just can't see on your own. That's what I get to do, helping people get out of their own way and understand, hey, what's going on here is a choice, right? And you know that whatever you're not changing, you're choosing, right? Like, helping people understand something as simple as that could just roll right off the tongue, can be a moment of breakthrough.
Yeah.
Because they understand, oh, wow, yeah, I really did create this. I really am choosing this. And I really can change this. I'm not a victim of my circumstances.
We make a lot of justifications for the decisions we make.
Yes.
But it doesn't make them the right decisions for us at that time. And I think it's very, very hard to step back and go, oh, you know what? I just need to be honest with myself and take a break. Or this isn't going to turn out exactly like I thought it was. Let me think about this other thing. But it's great to have outside people that you can go to. And I will say that's one of the other things with podcasting is I'm able to have conversations with people who've been a guest or who I've been a guest on their show, once a month or every other month or whatever, where we just say, hey, I need to do a check-in with you. Let's talk through some stuff. And we share what's going on with our businesses. And then, oh, you know what? Let me do this. I'll make this recommendation and the other person will. So it's really great because it's more informal coaching, but it's so nice to know that you're not alone in this experience. And so I love hearing that you have coaches as well as me.
Yes. I have to. If I don't, then I'm not really buying what I'm selling. I don't really believe in it. The truth that I shared a minute ago, that you can't see the whole picture when you're in the frame, that applies to me just like it applies to anybody else. I had a coach not long ago ask me a question, and no one had ever asked me that question.
Really?
And it really stopped me in my tracks. I'd been complaining about one thing that wasn't going right. I just can't seem to get any traction on this one thing. And he spun the lens on that and said, well, can I ask you something? Why are you complaining about the very thing that you wanted? Ouch. And the fact of the matter is, 2 years ago, we had conversations around, hey, this is where I want to go with this. This is what I want to get to. And that is the very thing that I was complaining about. It was a struggle that had come out of achieving that particular goal.
Right.
But every goal comes with their own struggles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is hard. Why are you complaining about the thing that you wanted?
Well,
I needed to hear that.
I completely resonate with that. And I also wonder if one of the parts of that is, I love being able to ask you this question because I think so many times women are asked, how do you balance everything? But you are, right, a coach. You took the time to write a book, which is not an easy feat. You have a family. You are a lead pastor of your church community. You have a podcast. You pour time and energy into every single one of these facets of your life. How the heck do you balance? How do you choose what's going to be more important one day to the next? Because I imagine this is also something that people come to you that need help with from your coaching?
100%. Productivity is a skill, and none of us are taught it. If I could require one thing to be taught in high school, it would be a productivity system, because I think that is one thing that we are not taught. And we're thrust into the world, and we have to figure it out. And unless you are wired in such a way that you gravitate toward that, most people just flounder and do the best they can. The answer to that question is that almost 20 years ago now, I read a book that completely changed my life. It was a book by David Allen called Getting Things Done.
Oh.
And it's about personal productivity. And when I read it, it absolutely floored me because I got it. It clicked immediately. And I was like, okay, I'm trying this. And I have been a student of that and practitioner of that system for almost 2 decades now. I got to meet David a few months ago because I invited him to be on the podcast. And it's such an amazing experience for somebody that you've never met, but who's made such a difference in your life. And I got to express my gratitude for what he wrote and what he has shared over the years, because it's really made a difference. That is the system that I use. GTD is the system that I use for productivity. That is how I accomplish what I do. The gist of the system and the secret of the system is this: I pre-decide things.
Wow.
I don't decide things in the moment. If you were to reach out to me in email and say, hey, we would love for you to be on this show. We'd love for you to speak at this event. We'd love for you to think. I'm not going to make the decision right then. I'm just not, right? I pre-decide. That's going to be part of my weekly review that I do every week, where I'm going to reflect back on what has happened the previous week. I'm going to celebrate the wins from the previous week. I'm going to capture those in my wins journal. I'm going to look at what went wrong, and I'm going to say, how could I do that differently next time? I'm going to process that learning. Then I'm going to look forward a week or more, and I'm going to say, what are the decisions I need to make now to bring the best version of myself into every environment I'm in? Now, I operate off a calendar. I operate off of lists, the GTD list system. I operate off of all of this, to be sure. But the pre-decisions in the weekly review, that's the secret sauce.
Yeah. Wow. What do you do when you don't feel like you have space for that? Well, I guess after 2 decades, you've just created your systems and processes and like time blocked. This is when I do this, and nobody can break that. I'm not going to schedule a meeting. I'm not going to do a podcast. I'm not going to do anything else at that time.
That is true. I do have blocks that I reserve for certain things. There's always flexibility inside planning, though.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that is that if I do have margin, that I'm able to say, yes, I can move and I can allow, and then I'm able to do that. Or if it's something family related, that's going to be high on the priority list now. I'm going to make sure that happens because I've got one daughter in college and one daughter in high school. And, they always say the days are long and the years are short, and they're not kidding. At the end of next year or next fall, so 16 months from now, we'll be empty nesters. And that's a different season. That's a different chapter. I've been very intentional about how I've spent my time when they were young. I did not write a book when they were young, right? This was my second book, the Catalytic Leadership book. I did not start writing that early because that was not the right season for that. When they were that young, first, I don't think I was ready to write at that level yet. But second, my attention was needed elsewhere, and I needed to prioritize. Again, pre-deciding. But I also knew that I wanted to do certain things. And so I said, okay, at this point, I want to do this. At this point, and I planned ahead, and I was intentional about that. At this point, I want to pursue some certifications. At this point, I want to start a business. At this point, I want to write some books. And there's great flexibility inside planning. And as new opportunities arise, I'm able to evaluate those. But I evaluate them carefully, and I say no to more than I say yes to, because that's how I survive.
This is a common theme that I've been hearing with pretty much every guest I've been interviewing lately. We're really all talking about being intentional, authentic with our time, with our own realities, what we can give, how we can serve, but also being willing to say no to things that don't fit that construct. I think you and I have talked about that too. My daughter is also in high school, and we're starting the college tours a little early because she knows what she wants to do. So it makes it very easy to narrow the field down.
Love that.
But I very much am saying, all right, anything I do has to revolve around my time with her and my schedule and taking this trip with her or taking that trip with her, because I only get so much time. We only have so much time on earth, and we only have so much time before they go off and have their own lives and don't need mom and dad as much. So,
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And including them in what we're doing is an incredible gift too. This coming weekend, 3 days from now, from when we're recording this, I'm taking my high school daughter with me to a conference that I'm going to right down in Atlanta. And she's going to go with me, and she can sit and learn, and we're going to travel, and we're going to hang out together and spend some good quality time together on that trip. We're going to learn a lot together. Yeah. And we get to discuss and unpack and process that. That's a gift.
That is a gift.
But it's also a choice.
Yes.
Like, it's not free. You have to make the investment of time and money, right? But is it worth it? Hands down. Mm-hmm. But you pre-decide those things. Mm-hmm. You decide what are going to be the priorities in your life. What's going to matter most? And then you evaluate everything in light of that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like you were naturally coaching people already before you went, now I'm going to get the certifications. Now I'm going to turn to this as a business that is purely coaching. But was it hard to make that transition? It seems like it probably just came naturally to you, but I know a lot of times people say, I'm going to start coaching, or I'm going to do this. And it's hard to get that first client in the door. It's hard to figure out what your perfect avatar is for the type of people you work best with. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and how you figured out your who and why and what.
That's a fantastic question. Just like everybody else, trying to make a turn and start a new thing is a challenge. I mean, the number one challenge that most new businesses struggle with, I think, is lead generation. There's got to be a lead generation engine that's going to fuel that. And until you figure that out, you don't really have a business. If you're just operating off referrals, that's more of a hobby because it's not predictable.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very few businesses can just have referrals as their sole source.
Reality.
Yeah. So you've got to have a consistent lead flow. And so that is what I spend a great deal of time learning about. And I read a lot, as you can tell behind me. I love to read. I love to learn. And we live in a day and time in which there are more ways and places to learn than there have ever been.
It can be very overwhelming sometimes, right?
It can. Are you familiar with the Strengths Finders assessment?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So my number one is input. Okay. And so I am constantly taking it. Constantly. I'm constantly, you're not going to overwhelm me with information.
Nice.
Right?
Okay.
You just keep bringing it in. Now, processing it and turning it into something actionable, that takes a little more time. But I'm constantly drawing in, taking notes, writing things down. This is just part of how I'm wired, right? I'm learning all the time. It's just a switch I can't flip off. That's helpful in this context because what I needed to do in building a business was learn how to build something that's predictable. And over time, that has come to pass, but it's never going to stop. There's never going to be a point at which I say, okay, I got that figured out. Now I can move on to something else. The world changes too much. Yeah. It's okay. That's part of the challenge. And I love the challenge for the entrepreneur is to continue to grow, continue to build and see more and more fruit and more results. For me, learning how to niche down, the importance of niching down, which I didn't know at the beginning, right? The importance of doing that. That was important. For me, now I work with entrepreneurs. I work with founders, specifically with digital marketing agency owners. That's who I've niched down to. And that is an area that, boy, I never would have seen that 15 years ago, as being a thing, right? Yeah. But that is where I really can add value based on the clients that I've served, the clients that I'm serving now. There's so much value they see in what I'm bringing. And as long as I can add value in a space, I feel like I'm in the right space. Yeah. But that was a learning process. It was not something that I read a book and figured it out or had a course online and figured it out. It was a process for me.
Was that scary? Because I know that, for me, oftentimes I know what direction I think I'm supposed to move in, and then something happens, I get an offer. And so you wonder, am I supposed to go after this shiny object? Am I supposed to take this stability? Is God leading me over here? And then later on you go, I think I was really still supposed to go down this path. And I was kind of being tested to see, did I believe in myself enough to go down my own path, right? And I think this is something that I have struggled with as an entrepreneur and many others do, because we have so many ideas. But then these other people who will offer us a steady paycheck, which we're like, that sounds great. But then we don't have time to work on our own project and process and what we're really supposed to be delivering to the world.
100%. And I will say that I did not take that leap with my own company willy-nilly. I didn't just like wake up one day and say, I'm going to quit everything else and do this thing that I've never done before. I don't think that's always the wisest course of action.
Right.
And so I worked in parallel. I built the business while I was doing other things, while I was teaching adjunct, while I was pastoring a church. I'm building a business. And with right productivity system, you can do that. You can manage your time in such a way that you're able to bring the best version of you to what you're doing. You've just got to be intentional. And that's the tripping point for most people. They're not being intentional with their time. They're scrolling, right? Or they're binge watching or whatever. And downtime is important. I schedule downtime. Like I'm that intentional about it. I will schedule breaks in my day when I will just go for a walk and I will just take 20 minutes and get outside, to get some vitamin D and some fresh air and just take a walk because I think that's important. And when I come back, it's like hitting a reset button on my brain. Like I'm raring to go now, but that's a learning I had to come to.
Yeah.
Like I had to figure that out along the way. I think building it in parallel and allowing it to grow and learning while I'm still being able to provide for and support my family took a lot of that pressure off because I wasn't like, okay, if I don't get this right in the next 20 minutes, we don't eat.
Yeah.
You have generated far too much pressure on yourself now. Like you can do two things at once. You can. You just got to be purposeful and intentional in how you use your time.
Yeah. Are you willing to share one or two tips from the book with us? I mean, I'm sure you've already shared some without flagging that they are part of the 12,
absolutely
constructs.
The very first chapter is around what I call the one non-negotiable of catalytic leadership. If there's one thing that will disqualify somebody from working with me, this is the reason I turn down clients and that I will not work with them is because they don't have this one thing. And usually it within the first 20 minutes of talking to somebody. And the one non-negotiable is a teachable spirit.
Oh.
If there is not a humility and a teachable spirit that somebody is intentionally cultivating, it's pretty obvious. If somebody gets on a call with me and wants to tell me what they already know and why this won't work, and okay, well, this isn't going to work, and I'm not going to waste your time, my time, or your money. Sorry. I'll turn them down, and I have and I will, because that's a non-negotiable for me. What I talk about in the book is how cultivating a teachable spirit is a daily practice. This is something you and I get to choose every morning. When I wake up, I make a decision. I pre-decide that I want to be the most teachable person in every environment I'm going to be in that day, in every conversation, in every classroom, in every workplace, every relationship. I want to walk in saying, what can I learn here?
Yeah.
That means I have to listen more than I speak. That means I have to understand that I don't know it all. And when I walk in with that mindset, that's the game changer.
Nice.
But that's a choice.
That is
it's
choice.
a daily choice.
Yeah. It's funny. I think about things because I do, like my partner and I always say, we choose each other every day. We choose to be in this relationship with each other. We choose to pour into each other, and it's not always easy. And his work schedule is crazy and my schedule is crazy. But just knowing that we have made this choice and that we're going to continue making this choice, it helps create a sense of relief. So if you lean into things, right, like you're choosing to be teachable, you're choosing to have a teachable spirit, you're choosing how you're going to show up, what you're going to prioritize every single day, that helps make a lot of the other decisions very easy. Those things that you said, like the pre-planning, what to say no to.
Yes, 100%. The people that you surround yourself with will either contribute to this being true about you or it not being true. The books that you read will either contribute to this being true about you or it not. The podcast that you listen to, right? So many different components of your life, the conferences you attend, the workshops you watch, all of these things contribute to you either moving toward the person you want to become or moving away from it. These are a choice. And the thing that I drive hard with my clients is that your locus of control, the things you have 100% control of in your life, is not that big. But you have control of your attitude, you have control of your priorities, you have control of your choices. You decide those things. If you think you are going to decide somebody else's attitude or priorities or choices, then you are trying to expand your locus of control now to the place of manipulation.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy for you or for them.
Yeah.
Focus on what you have control over. And the cultivation of a teachable spirit is a daily choice. And all of these things that contribute to your growth personally and professionally, these are things that you can build into your life on purpose in such a way that they're moving you toward the person you want to become. You just need a plan.
How did you choose to niche down to founders and entrepreneurs and CEOs of digital agencies?
That's a longer story. I'll give you the nutshell. My grandfather started his own business. He worked for a furniture company and was a salesman for a furniture company and started his own business selling baby clothes. And this was back in the 60s. Started selling baby clothes in this storefront and turned into a whole baby shop with, cribs and toys and the whole bit, and was very successful at it, and sold his business in such a way and was able to exit with recurring income for the rest of his life for he and for my grandmother until they both passed. Such an incredible story from people who did not come from money at all and built this thing from nothing. I watched my dad, who started his own advertising agency back in the early 70s. He started this with traditional advertising. This is way before digital, right? So you're talking TV and radio and newspapers.
Print,
yeah, build like the whole bit. And I watched him build his agency my whole life. And I watched the good, the bad, the ugly. I watched, the incredible wins and the heartbreaking fails. The entrepreneurial gene has been in my family. I'm the third generation of this, but I have gotten to watch what happens when entrepreneurs get in their own way and get out of their own way. I've watched what happens when you learn to delegate and when you don't. And so when I had the opportunity to start working in the digital agency space with marketing agency owners, I said, hey, this is interesting. It's like the next generation version of what my dad did, right? Yeah. In a way, I feel like I'm helping people in that space in a way that, I think if there had been somebody in my dad's world that could have helped come alongside and helped him, it could have helped him avoid some of those ditches.
Right. And
now I can help other people who are in a similar space. That's incredibly fulfilling for me. So it's a longer story, but that's why.
That's really beautiful, though. And to that point, your book, though, is for anybody who wants to be an intentional leader. It doesn't have to be somebody in the digital space.
No, I'm actually located outside of Washington, D.C. And so a lot of my clients over the years have been in the government space, contractors, educators, C-suite leaders, very, very large multinational corporations, and solopreneurs. And these principles are ones that I've pulled from all of them. Wow. Because leadership principles apply no matter where you lead. They're going to look different. You're going to apply them different. But the principle holds true. The teachable spirit, for instance. It doesn't matter what you lead, right? I don't care how many people you have on your team or in your company. If you lead just you or if you lead thousands, it doesn't matter. Because if you cultivate a teachable spirit, that's going to trickle down and that's going to impact the entire organization.
Boom. So true. Your book is available on Amazon. I see that you can get it Kindle, if you have Kindle Unlimited like me. Right?
Yes.
Read it for free if that's easier than the audiobook and the paperback. Did you record the audiobook yourself or did you have somebody else do it?
I did it. I did it because I always love when I listen to an audiobook and the author reads it.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Because I feel like you get so much more of the heart of the book in that. And I thought, I have to do that.
Yeah. Wow, what a process. I mean, there's so many more things we can talk about, but I feel like we have a really good sense of who you are, who you work with, how people can learn more, right? From your podcast, from the book, your website, which has a lot of great resources. And that's catalyticleadership.net, which will also be in the show notes. Thanks. Is there anything else, William, that you really want to share that's on your heart right now? Is the first question. The second one is, of course, I always ask people if they have a favorite quote, family motto, a verse that makes your heart sing, that really inspires you every day in the work that you do.
Wow. I think the one thing I'd love to leave everybody with is this, that your choices drive so much of your life. and you have the ability to make those choices. Don't buy into this idea that you are a victim because that's not helpful to you.
Right.
Understand that your locus of control includes your choices. And if you don't like what's currently happening in the direction you're currently going, you can choose to change that.
Yeah.
You simply have to choose to change that. As far as a quote, I'll use one that has, ever since I first heard it, it's just bounced around so deep inside my soul. It's by one of the guys who's taught me a great deal about leadership, a guy named Andy Stanley. He says, direction, not intention, determine your destination.
Yeah.
And I love that. If I get on I-95 headed north, but I have the intention to go to Florida, I can have all the intentions I want. I will never get there. My direction determines my destination, not my intentions. And so that kind of goes back to what I'd love to leave your listeners with, this idea that you have the ability to set not just your intention, but your direction. Choose to do that. Be intentional, be purposeful.
Yeah, that's so fantastic. I always love our conversations, as I said earlier, and I just appreciate you sharing so much of yourself and how you took this path that I think a lot of people take when they're starting out. We think we know what we want to do, but then we realize, oh, that's not really it. We might take a break. I also went back to school later and just went into the workforce, because same thing. I realized this is not really what I want to be doing. Let me just work and then I'll go back when the timing is right. And I think we just need to really encourage people to find their own paths to their passions and to their purpose and what is going to make them a great servant leader and helper in the world.
So true. I love that. There's not one right way to do this thing, right? Figure it out. You get to learn, you get to experiment. And if you have that mindset that everything's an experiment, that's going to take you far.
Yeah, truly. And that's going to wrap up at least this episode of Your Brand Amplified, The Experiment. I really had so much fun speaking with Dr. William Attaway of Catalytic Leadership. That's also the name of his podcast and his book and his website. So you can find out more about him and the work he does to help people live really intentionally as leaders. So thank you again for being on the show. And thank you to everybody who's watching or listening to this episode. We really appreciate all of you being here and helping us, letting us, help you find your intention in the world. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.